Unfortunately, Saints lose 20-10 to the Pittsburgh Steelers at Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh. We'll be joined pretty shortly by Aaron Summers, who is at Acrisure Stadium, was there firsthand to see this game. But unfortunately for the Saints, they dropped to 3-7 this season. And although we can spin the positives as we may, one game out of first place, 2 games out of first place in the NFC South Division, this a disheartening loss for the Saints on the road, because this Pittsburgh team came have cost them games and victories so far this season. They couldn't stop the run. Pittsburgh ran for 217 yards, and Pittsburgh came in as a team averaging 95 yards a game on the ground. And also, the Saints committed 10 penalties. 6 of those penalties gave the Steelers first downs, and they were defensive penalties. And also, the Saints turned it over a couple of times, a couple of interceptions. So really just not a good overall performance by the Saints at all. Not what they were expecting coming into this game, not what they were hoping for defensively or offensively, and they couldn't get any pivotal plays on special teams. So we're 2 weeks removed from the Saints playing their most complete game of the season in a 24-0 victory over the Las Vegas Raiders, and now back-to-back losses where a lot of the same things have cropped up, and in terms of the inability to stop the run, in terms of the unfortunately committing penalties and just not being clean throughout the game. So we're going to take it to Aaron Summers right now. And Aaron, you were there on the ground and you saw this team firsthand in person today. What were some of the thoughts that you came away from this game with?
That they needed. Luckily, I wasn't on the ground for all of it. I was able to stay upstairs and keep warm, but definitely was cold out there today. There were some snow flurries. I don't know, maybe that had an effect on the things too. I don't know, JD.
No, I mean, we're not going to attribute it to that because Pittsburgh played in the same conditions. And even though the Steelers probably a little more acclimated to that, it's just football weather. And the Saints just didn't perform as they wanted to. We saw early in the game, Najee Harris, Pittsburgh running back, had a 36-yard run, the longest run for the Steelers this season. In fact, the Steelers had, I believe, 6 plays of 20-plus yards, and that not being an explosive offensive team, but it shows you how they were able to take advantage of the gaps and maybe pretty much gash the Saints defensively. And then, of course, the turnovers by Andy Dalton, the first one off Jarvis Landry's hands, seemed to be a fairly catchable ball, but Jarvis Landry thought he was interfered with on that one, and unfortunately it winds up in the hands of a Pittsburgh defensive back. So the Saints don't have great luck, and then when they get the football, unable to do much with it, rushing for 29 yards, I believe, in this one, which, season low and only passing for 157. They don't possess the football much because they can't stay on the field. They can't convert on third downs, and we've seen that for consecutive weeks now where they weren't able to extend drives by possessing the football and staying on the field. They've had some opportunities. We had a great Blake Gillikin punt in the third quarter that goes out of bounds, a 58-yarder that goes out of bounds at the 2-yard line. But the Saints can't get off the field on third down. They can't get stops. And so they can't flip the field position. They can't get a quick score out of it. They can't manage to do much of anything with it. And unfortunately, it's been pretty much the story of this season for this team defensively, where they have not been able to be the bell cow for this team. That came into the season. We thought the Saints defense was going to carry this team, and it just hasn't been there. Rookie Alontae Taylor had a difficult game today. 3 defensive penalties, all of them leading to first downs. And so, he's still a bright spot, but he's going to have some of those days. And unfortunately, that was one of those days today for him against the Steelers. But all in all, just not what the Saints were hoping for, not what you were expecting from the Saints. And, as this slips a little bit closer and farther away to unfortunately, the Saints not making the playoffs, because you continue to go this path and you can't even talk about you can't even think about playoffs. The Saints are getting to the point now where they're getting to be in a fairly desperate mode, because again, 3-7, only 7 games remain in this regular season, and they've got to rip off a streak if they hope to win the NFC South. And again, it's not because any other team in the division is burning it up, but you cannot continue to lose games as the Saints are and hope that the opponents continue to lose games. You've got to, at some point, take care of business yourself, and they have not been able to win many or any of these games here as of late. So, the Saints just having a difficult time of it. A game 10-10 at halftime, 10-10 through the third quarter. The Saints got a late touchdown in the first half, 15-yard touchdown pass from Andy Dalton to Juwan Johnson. Those two have been able to hook up pretty regularly here lately, and they seem to have a nice little chemistry going. But Saints unable to score beyond that. Still, Aaron, we've noticed the chemistry between Andy Dalton and Juwan Johnson picking up. And hopefully, do you believe this is something that can continue going forward, where Juwan Johnson becomes a little bit bigger part of this offense, because the passing offense has struggled?
I've always liked seeing Juwan Johnson be a target, especially in the end zone, because of his height. He always seems like he has an advantage there. He's had 4 touchdowns now, receiving touchdowns this year, which is tied for his career high. And it's the most for any player on the Saints offense right now. It had been Michael Thomas, who had 3 in the first 3 games that he played. He was leading the team despite not playing for the majority of the game. So it's good to see Juwan Johnson getting back into the end zone today. Seems like he has been an easy go-to target for Andy Dalton. Jarvis Landry got involved a little bit in the offensive game as well. A couple plays there, he definitely thought that he should have caught a ball that the interception that he tipped should have been called for pass interference, but it was not. And it looks like now we're going to have Dennis Allen.
Okay. Performance that wasn't good enough, in really in all phases. We didn't play well enough. We didn't coach well enough. We have to do a better job. We fought ourselves back, got back into the game at halftime, felt like we were in a good position, and we really just didn't do anything in the second half, so we have to be better.
Yeah, late in the game, 3rd down, 4th down, you guys are missing all the interior offensive line. You ran both behind them both times. Why did you guys do that there?
Well, we felt like we could make a first down, and we didn't do it. And we have to be able to make, we got to be able to make, what was it, 1.5 yards, I think, so we have to be able to make that. So, yeah, we got to make it.
Is that frustrating on penalties?
Very, yeah. And look, I'll go back and look at all of them. I know some of them certainly look legitimate. So we'll have to go back and look at it. But I think we had 10. I think they had 3 or 4. So and some of those that we had specifically on defense, kept drives alive, gave them first downs. So yeah, it's disappointing.
Dennis, did you guys expect to have this much trouble running the ball today?
No, look, we knew they were a good, run defense. And we knew that they were going to have some juice coming back with having TJ back out there. So, but look, we felt like we would be able to run the ball better than we did. We knew it'd be tough, but we felt like we could run it better than we did.
Dennis, when the team is kind of having the same sort of problems on a weekly basis, whether it's the turnovers or not forcing them or having trouble stopping the run, what does that all boil down to?
yeah, I think we got to coach it better and play it better. I mean, I just think we have to be better in a lot of areas.
At this point, would you think about a quarterback change for next week?
I'm not going to get into that right now. We just, came off the game. We'll have plenty of time to evaluate where we're at in a lot of areas.
You said James's health, you're healthy enough to play, though. Would his health, considering he's probably still not 100%, impact that decision? Is there a point?
Look, I mean, I know we're all, looking for answers there, but I'm not going to go there right now. We'll evaluate where we're at and we'll have a plan for this coming up week.
Dennis, after a 7th loss, how does the message change from the 6th to the 7th loss, or does it change in the locker room of the team?
Well, look, I mean, when you get in situations like these, you have to fight your way out of it. There's no other way to get out of it other than fight your way out of it. And, this is where you got to lean on the leadership of the group, and they got to pull us through.
Why did you guys decide to have Callaway down this week?
We felt like that was the group that gave us the best chance.
Do you worry about keeping the locker room together at this point?
No.
Dennis, did you do anything in particular to limit AK in this game, especially just as a passing target with that?
Yeah, look, we struggled to get in much of a rhythm offensively, and so I think it all started with our inability to be able to run the football. I don't think they did anything, in particular that, took him away. We just didn't get him the ball as much as we probably would like to have.
When you have someone like Alontae Taylor, Paulson Adebo, who have more than one penalty in a game, do you talk to them in the moment?
Well, look, yeah, some of the fouls are, aggressive, fouls. So no, I didn't specifically go over to each one of them and have a discussion with them about the fouls. We'll get them corrected.
Did you see this as a good opportunity to kind of stay within striking distance of the division and just kind of those things?
Yeah, look, we got to worry about winning games, and that's really where the focus is.
You say you guys got to play better, coach better. What do you guys have to coach better in that equation?
Well, I think some of it would come down to some fundamentals and technique. I still think there's got to be some improvement there. The discipline aspect of we had a couple of false start penalties. There's just a lot of different areas that we've got to improve on.
And I know you're not going to want to make an excuse or anything, but when health is such, it's an obvious logical factor in this. How much do you guys equate that into kind of what's going on?
Look, I mean, listen, I couldn't sit here and say that it's not a factor, but it's the nature of the beast that we're dealing with. So we got to find a way to get the guys out there that we have on the field and get them to play to their best ability, and then they got to go out and execute.
When you look at where this team is now compared to maybe where they were at the beginning of the season, do you feel like this team's improved?
In certain areas, yeah, but we're not getting the results that we need to get. And certainly, I think these last couple of weeks we've probably taken a little bit of a step back in terms of production. So we'll go back and evaluate and keep working.
When you say you're not worried about the locker room, why not?
Because I think we have a good locker room. I think we have a bunch of guys that are fighters, and I think they're going to still, fight and compete. All right, thanks.
Okay, locker room's open. We'll have Andy Dalton as soon as he's dressed, and we'll bring him in here.
And there you heard Coach Dennis Allen of the Saints. Not a lot of answers for the Saints right now, unfortunately. When a team is 3 for 12 on third down and the team can't establish the running game and can't get off the field on third down. And we mentioned
Just use this door.
earlier that a dominant time of possession for the Steelers in this one. 39 minutes, essentially, of time of possession for Pittsburgh in this game, which leaves the Saints for 21 minutes. And again, 3 out of 12 on third down. You can't establish any rhythm that way. You can't stay on the field offensively. You can't establish any time of possession. You can't keep their defense on the field and hopefully wear them down. You can't put together any kinds of sustained drive to be able to score. And so those are the issues that the Saints had in this one. And then he talked about the defensive penalties, where some of those were just discipline. You've got to be a little bit more disciplined in terms of your hand placement or in terms of your assignment and those kinds of things. And those penalties, and you couple that with the third down percentages, and you couple that with the inability to get off the field on third down as a defense, and you couple that with the offense turning the ball over a couple of times, as well as being ineffective in the run game, 29 yards and averaging less than 2 yards to carry. You mix all that together, and it's going to be just about impossible to win a football game, especially on the road against a team that's hungry or as hungry as you are in the Pittsburgh Steelers, because the Steelers understand, now they're 3-6, and they're trying to climb their way into the playoffs. The Saints fall to 3-7 against a team that was coming off a bye, that was extremely hungry and attempting to get itself into a position where it might be able to run off a string of victories, so it might be able to put itself in playoff position also. So, Aaron, you heard Coach Allen. What are some of your thoughts on what he had to offer today?
Coach Allen said that he felt like they've been saying the same things for the past few weeks, and we've been saying it as well. It's been the mistakes, the penalties, the turnovers, the lack of consistency among the team. We saw it in a couple areas in a couple times when they were able to go down the field the last 2 minutes of the second quarter and have that touchdown drive to Juwan Johnson. We saw Dalton hit Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave, Juwan Johnson earlier in that drive, and then again in the end zone. So there is the ability to score. We've seen them put together good offensive drives. They just haven't done it consistently, and I think that's been the issue. Defensively, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, it was a lot to do with the penalties. Pittsburgh had 6 first downs off penalties, and that's not going to help you win a ball game when you are committing penalties at that rate on crucial third downs, and you are handing over first downs and another opportunity to your opposition. 10 penalties overall for 74 yards. It's not a recipe for success. It's something that Coach Allen talked about. He said he doesn't necessarily agree. I'm not going to put words quite in his mouth because I don't want him to get fined or anything like that, but did not sound like he agreed with all of the penalty calls or lack of calls in this game. He did say he's going to go back and watch the tape and see how he felt about some of them. But in terms of Alontae Taylor, Paulson Adebo, they're out there, they're trying to be aggressive, they're trying to break up passes, and a couple of those, they can go either way as far as a defensive pass interference or not. When we saw a few non-calls on the Saints side in that regard. You mentioned earlier about the third downs, the 3-12 conversion rate for the Steelers. They converted 9 of 17, so not that much better, although it was over 50%. They were able to convert there. And then we talked about the red zone. The only time that the Saints did get into the red zone, they were able to score today, so that is a good thing, moving in the right direction there. And of course, we always got to find the positives in these games. Cam Jordan adds another body to his count because he has now sacked 45 different players in the NFL, 113 sacks by Cam Jordan. Always impressive. Is actually the most sacks overall by the Saints in this game for the season. They had 6 total sacks, so they were getting to Kenny Pickett, just having a hard time affecting the play and forcing turnovers, which is another area that they really need to address because they've been last in that takeaway ratio throughout the whole season, and it didn't get any better today, JD.
Yeah, Saints, and another thing, not to use an excuse, but here is a fact. I mean, they finished out this game with 3 offensive linemen that they did not enter the season thinking that those would be guys who would be playing significant snaps in the game. Josh Andrews at center, Calvin Throckmorton at left guard, and then Landon Young, at left tackle. The only regular starters they had in Cesar Ruiz at right guard and Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle. And if you're going to have a mix and match offensive line in that way, it's going to be difficult at times because you don't have the chemistry developed between those guys because they don't have the reps together as a starting unit, have the reps together in practice or in the game simulations or game situations. And so there's going to be some difficulty there. Josh Andrews came in this week basically to play center, and Cesar Ruiz finished out last week for Eric McCoy at center, and he just moved over from right guard to center. But it's difficult to play that way when you're talking about playing against an NFL team, which has a defensive line that has had that opportunity to get that cohesion because it's played together. And even though TJ Watt was coming back after an absence since the opening game of the season, he still understands how to play with that line, and they had the bye week to be able to work on their cohesion and their unity. The Saints did not have that luxury, and I think it showed at times. It certainly showed in the run game. There was a situation in the fourth quarter where the Saints were 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, weren't able to convert either run. Alvin Kamara stopped short, and then Andy Dalton stopped short on a quarterback sneak. So those are the plays that you look at it and say, are you able to do those things because you have that offensive.
Yeah, the Paulson Adebo pass interference call, there was that one in the end zone that allowed the Steelers to get closer, 1 yard line, and Pickett rushes it in for the touchdown. And that's what started the Steelers really taking over towards the end of that game, because at half it was 10-10. Most of the third quarter it was tied at 10-10 as well. The Saints defensively had kept the Steelers out of the end zone, forcing 2 field goal attempts in the third and fourth. First one was a missed field goal. They were able to hit the second. But they were doing a good job at least keeping them out of the end zone until later in the game there. So, again, there are some silver linings to this game. There are things that they can build off of. It's just the consistency, putting it all together for an entire game. You talked about the offensive line and how there's injuries on that side of the ball, but even coming into this game, they are very depleted on the defensive side of the ball as well. No Marcus Davenport, no Pete Werner, who went out in the Monday night game against the Ravens. He leads the NFL in tackles heading into this game. That's definitely going to be a factor. And then not only do you have those two that are out, we've been dealing without Marshawn Lattimore as your top corner, definitely a shutdown corner that you don't have in this game. So you're dealing with Paulson Adebo, who's a second-year player, and a rookie, Alontae Taylor, who's missed most of the season due to injury himself. I think there were some good moments from Chris Harris, especially to start the game. He had a pass breakup. He was all over the place to start. And then, let's see, Caden Ellis, who came in as the starting linebacker, he was definitely effective. He had a sack. Second game in a row that he's had a sack, a forced fumble, tackle for a loss, quarterback hit, and 8 tackles overall. So he was effective. He forced an incompletion of Najee Harris in the end zone at one point. So he was definitely doing a really good job filling in his role, somebody that we don't see play that many snaps. He usually comes in and spot play throughout the game, but because of Pete Werner being out, definitely played a lot more. So there are players that were able to step up, but overall, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, especially when you have a short week. The Saints playing on Monday, the Steelers having 10 days off between their games because they had the bye week. Then you have to make all those changes on the offensive line. You only have 2 actual practice days because they pushed things back to only practicing Thursday and Friday. And then in the middle of the game, your starting left tackle goes out with a concussion to add, insult to injury, for no pun intended, I guess, even though that's exactly what we are dealing with. I know we're waiting for quarterback Andy Dalton to come in. He is supposed to come to the podium, and that's going to be it for the players in here today. We will have sound from the locker room that we'll put up on NewOrleansSaints.com in a little bit. I know we have people in there as well. So we're just kind of waiting to hear from the starting quarterback and see his thoughts after this game. I think overall, he had to rely on his passing game for a majority of things because they couldn't get the run going. Trying to look up at his stats. Let's see, offensively, Dalton was 17 of 27 for 174 yards. He did have that one touchdown to Juwan Johnson, and his long was an 18-yard pass, and then he did have the 2 interceptions. Taysom Hill did take a couple direct snaps. He did have one pass attempt to Alvin Kamara early in the game, but he overthrew him. Kamara was held to 26 yards on the ground, just 8 attempts. So definitely not a lot of usage across the board. Overall, there was just 15 rushing attempts by the team, Taysom Hill, Andy Dalton, and Howard also got 1 carry. 29 yards total on the ground for the Saints today, which is definitely a season low. They'd only had 48 in the game a couple weeks ago against the Ravens. So the ground game has definitely been limited over the past few.
Yeah,
John, anything that sticks out to you that we haven't quite covered, or do you want to look ahead to our next game?
Well, thank you, Erin. We have worked her overtime today, folks. She has earned every single penny. We had a little technical difficulties, but why wouldn't we on a day like this, right? Of course, with the unfortunate way the Saints played, and now we have a little technical difficulties back home. But we are back, and we are back at it. And as Erin mentioned, this team has unfortunately struggled. She mentioned some of the numbers. The only 29 rushing yards for Alvin Kamara, and if this team's going to win, he's going to have more production than that. He's going to have more touches than that. But when you're 3 for 12 on third down, it's difficult to be able to get him the ball, and it's difficult to be able to get into an offensive rhythm. We understand the Saints want to spread the ball around to Chris Olave and to Jarvis Landry, and now Juwan Johnson seems to be emerging at tight end. But again, if you can't convert on third down, and the Saints had, I think the vast majority of their third down opportunities were 3rd and 7 or longer. Mm-hmm. There's only so much you can do playbook-wise in those situations. There aren't a lot of plays that you can lean on consistently to be able to gain that type of yardage to be able to convert a third down. So those are the situations that the Saints have to be able to get out of offensively, which means they've got to have better production on 1st and 2nd down. And if you've heard that before, then yes, you absolutely have heard that before, because not only have we said it here, it's one of the things that Coach Dennis Allen has been saying. It's one of the things that the players have been saying, how you have to get the production early, and that way you don't put yourself in position where your opponent can essentially just kind of lay back and play the pass and don't have to respect the run. Erin also mentioned the 6 sacks, so that's an encouraging sign for the Saints to be able to come up with 6 sacks against a mobile quarterback. Kenny Pickett was someone who escaped a lot of pressure in this game, but the Saints were able to get him on the ground 6 times and record 6 sacks, so that's always helpful for a defense. But unfortunately, the 9 for 17 third down conversions is a killer in a situation like this, because you get them in a situation where you get them 3rd and long, or even if it's 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2. If you're the Saints defense, you still have to be able to convert. You still got to be able to get off the field in those situations. You still have to be able to get the stop. And unfortunately, that unit has not consistently been able to do that for the vast majority of this season. We've only seen it maybe 2 or 3 games where the Saints defense probably felt pretty good about the tape that they put out there. That might be the Tampa Bay game. That might be obviously the Raiders game, and I can't think of another one, but they've had a couple where they feel pretty good about, but overwhelming majority, we're talking about 10 games, so maybe 3 that they felt really good about defensively.
The second half of the Falcons game to open the season?
The Falcons game. But that leaves 7 where they have not felt very good about what they've been able to put out on the field defensively in terms of getting stops and getting off the field and limiting the opponent to points. Those things, and even in a couple of victories, 39-32 over Seattle, they gave up a ton of yards and a ton of points. So, defensively, that unit just simply has not stood up to be what it expected to be coming into this season. And time quickly running out for this team to be able to be what it wants to be. Now you can still piece it together. You can still string together some victories, but that's not anything anyone wants to talk about right now because of the way this team is playing. You still got to get 1 before you can worry about getting 2 or 3. and the way the Saints are playing, you legitimately can question, where's the one going to come? So now they've got to go back to the drawing board and hopefully, reset and recalibrate and all those things, because these games come quickly. It doesn't seem like it. They're a week apart, but, you have all week to worry about, the mistakes you made and hopefully correct them and move on to a new opponent. But that new opponent looks at your tape. They know exactly what it is you did poorly in the previous game. And when they see that you allowed 217 rushing yards, after a week after you allowed 188 rushing yards to the Ravens, then of course the opponent is going to say, we can run the ball against the Saints because they're giving it up against everybody. So, that's something that's going to have to be rectified, and it's got to be taken care of quickly, because, as soon as you step on the field again, the next team you play is going to feel like they can take advantage of that. And the Saints offensively just simply have to be able to get something going. It was good to see Jarvis Landry on the field for the first time in 5 games. He did make a contribution, and it's good to see him back out there. Hopefully he can get back in rhythm and they can reestablish some chemistry, because he hadn't been out there a lot of time with Andy Dalton or Jameis Winston for that matter. So he hadn't played a lot this season, and they have not been able to utilize his talents much this season. But he will relieve some pressure from the rookie Chris Olave, who has been fantastic so far. And Chris Olave could use the help, obviously. So hopefully that will help. They've got to get Alvin Kamara a little bit more involved in the passing game as well as the run game, because he's such a valuable asset to this team. And unfortunately, in this game, the opportunities weren't there. But again, that all stems back to being 3 for 12 on third down and not giving yourself that extra set of downs and not getting more at-bats. And, Pittsburgh looked dominant defensively, but a lot of that had to do with the Saints' ineffectiveness and their inefficiency. And so those are a lot of things to be able to clean up, or have to clean up, before you go into the next game. And I think, Aaron says we're waiting on a quarterback, Andy Dalton, who did have a touchdown pass in this one to go along with the 2 interceptions. One of the interceptions being off Jarvis Landry's hand, so that was an unfortunate one. But Aaron, just kind of assess how Andy Dalton played in this one, because he's had some games where it didn't look real bad. I mean, statistically, you look at the 2 interceptions and you say, it wasn't a very good game, but for the most part, it looks like some reads were there, and he made some good throws. And when you got 3 backup offensive linemen out there, there just isn't a lot of time to be able to hold on to the ball and wait for routes to develop, especially when you're talking about 3rd and longs.
Yeah, and talking to everybody in the locker room, they're confident in Andy Dalton and his play, his decision making. They feel like he has a good hold over the offense, and he doesn't ever really get flustered. He's very calm. He remains in control. We're going to hear from him pretty soon, but he made a couple mistakes towards the end of the game, although it wasn't like he was throwing into double coverage or making risky calls. He was just trying to hit a man, and Jarvis, he kind of overthrew Jarvis in the one instance, and it hit the top of Jarvis's hands. He tips it into a defender's hand. So that's kind of one of those wacky interceptions. You can't really help that. The other one, the defender definitely cut in front of the offensive player, and that was a pretty easy interception on the Steelers' part there. But it's at the end of the game when he's trying to make something happen, because they've been behind when he's made some of these mistakes. Usually he's been pretty good command of the offense, and he's made good decisions and helped move them down the field. Offensively, they weren't able to get going on the ground. Definitely had to have more passing attempts in this one. It's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do this next week going forward, how the offense is going to change, if any, if they're going to get anybody back on the field health-wise on both sides of the ball. They're going to be preparing to see the Rams, who are going through their own issues this season. They're in the middle of a game right now as they're facing the Cardinals, both the Rams and the Cardinals playing each other with backup quarterbacks today. So Rams definitely having some adjustments on their own that they're going to have to deal with from today's game and getting ready to play us next Sunday. That game, it's going to be another Fox game, so we'll have that crew in the Superdome before they head to San Francisco for that game right after Thanksgiving. And it'll be right back into division play. The Saints coming into this game had the 8th easiest record for the remainder of the season. So it doesn't seem like it's going to be too hard in front of them if they can just kind of fix some of the issues that they've had at this point in the season. I'm sorry, I keep looking over my shoulder because every time the door opens, I think that it might be Andy Dalton, and it's just all the members of the media. So I'm keeping an eye out for you guys back at home. But definitely the reason why I think that the schedule is easy for the Saints going forward is because the opponents that they have to face is the rest of the division, and the NFC South right now isn't too tough of a division to play in. Are the top team just 5-5? It's the only division that doesn't have a team in it over 500. So that helps with an easier schedule the rest of the way. They'll be playing at Tampa Bay on a Monday night game, and then they'll welcome the Falcons and the Carolina Panthers to the Superdome before they have the remaining 2 away games against the Cleveland Browns on the 24th, and then the Eagles on New Year's Day. So got a bunch of games ahead of us, JD. We'll see how things pan out over the next couple weeks, see if we can get some of these players healthy and clean up some of the mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm sure that before they can get to that stretch is the Saints have had back-to-back games here where they won't be pleased with what they've seen on tape in terms of physicality. When you're talking about time of possession, when you're talking about the running game and it being as lopsided as it has been in the last couple of games, that's one of the things that the Saints were able to accomplish against the Saints were able to accomplish against the Raiders, and also in some of their other victories where they felt like they were the dominant physical team. They were able to impose their will. And in these last couple of games, when you look at the time of possession and you look at the running yards against 188 for the Ravens and 217 today for the Steelers, those are not numbers
like Andy
that
Dalton's
are
at the podium now.
of a team that wants to be dominant defensively. And certainly when they're able to run against you that way, you're going to have some difficulty. And that's one of the things that I'm sure is going to irk the Saints. Now we have Andy Dalton at the podium.
Talk about today, how rough it was, and just having to do things without the big offensive linemen.
At the end of the day, we didn't make enough plays. That's what it came down to. We weren't able to sustain drives, and that led to us not scoring enough points. It's really frustrating, you know. We know the potential of what we can be and what we can do, and to have games go like this, consecutive weeks, it's tough.
Maybe can you describe kind of what happened on the 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, late in the kind of fourth there, where you had a chance to still be in the game at that point?
Yeah, we ran the ball both times and weren't able to get it. I think that's what happened.
And just, what happened on the second interception, the throw to Kevin White down the sideline? What would you see and just kind of what went wrong?
It's a one-on-one play, just trying to give Kevin a chance, and unfortunately he didn't come down with it.
Coach Allen says he believes in this locker room, the leadership moving forward. You've been around this team for a little while. These are tough times, but how do you feel the core of this team can handle it moving forward?
We have the right people in this locker room. We've got the right people on this team and in this organization, and the only way we can do it is we got to stick together and understand what we have to do. Everybody needs to look at themselves and say, what can I do better? And if we do that, you know, we'll get this thing turned around.
Did they do anything in particular to take away the run? I know the run discard was big today.
Yeah, we just weren't able to run it. And I think at the end of the day, they made plays and we didn't.
You mentioned the potential 10 weeks into the season. What do you guys got to do to achieve that and be at it consistently week in, week out?
I think we've got to put everything together, and we've got to, execute the plan that we have in place. We have to understand how teams are playing us and be able to make adjustments and do different things. And I think it comes down to just everybody being on the same page.
Do you feel like that's still in front of you guys and you can get there?
Yeah, I do.
From what you were seeing, tape you saw, different things you were watching, you feel maybe they got a boost or anything, or how they were playing, with Watt back in the lineup?
I mean, when you get one of the best pass rushers in the league back, I mean, obviously that's a boost for your team.
Andy, you never really want to play without 3 of your regular starting 5 offensive linemen. What kind of challenge does that create when you kind of incorporate new guys in at a, where they're all kind of having to play together?
Yeah, I think that's a big a big thing when you got starting linemen out, guys that have played a ton of ball, and now you've got new guys thrown in there. It's something that we still got to find a way to execute and make it work.
You're right. You look like you took like a shot to the face or something like that.
Yeah, I'll be all right.
How do the struggles in the running game affect what you do? Obviously, how do you want balance as an offense?
Right, yeah, I think for us, I mean, you go back a couple weeks ago, I feel like that was the thing that we were doing best offensively. We had a good balance. And the last 2 weeks, we haven't been able to run the ball. And that's hurt us. Put ourselves in, unfavorable situations, 3rd and long. And the efficiency on 1st and 2nd down hasn't been good enough.
How would you assess just some of the struggles offensively, especially towards the end? The last drives, whenever it was still kind of close, a 1-score game, 3-point games, how would you kind of assess how it went, kind of down the stretch?
We got to make more plays.
Anything else?
Thanks, guys.
Here on the Saints post-game show, I'm John DeShazier. For Aaron Summers, Aaron was at Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh today. Unfortunately, the Saints, a 20-10 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Saints dropped to 3-7 as they still endeavor to win that NFC South Division title. It still is out there, amazingly so. There still is an opportunity for the Saints, but they really, really have put themselves into a tight situation. Let's see if they can loosen up that situation a little bit here in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, in the Caesars Superdome next weekend against the Los Angeles Rams. Again, I'm John DeShazier. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you again next week.